We're back with Flash, our model for today. He has his double on. Something you may have noticed is that I like to have lip chains on my horses. It does nothing except to keep the curb chain from falling off. And I've had curb chains fall off, so I use a lip chain to avoid that. And so when we go to a double, something I like over this process, over the Western process that I used to do, was in the Western process, we had many curbs trying to help the horse to understand the education to the curb. The nice thing with the double is that it's a blending effect, and I found that to be really effective, even if I do go back and ride Western again with a curb. The first thing that we'll do is make sure that the horse knows his flexions, and he immobilizes the jaw with the snaffle. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing because that's a whole thing. So does he know his flexions on the snaffle? Which he does. And don't push. There you go. There you go. Good. Good. And then after you go through and review his flexions on the snaffle, you make sure he has the entire program on the snaffle, including pole flexion and neck extension. If he has all of those understandings very clearly, then you can start educating the horse in the curb. Some of the things we see to, because I don't have time to go through an entire program, is we want to make sure that the horse is mobilizing the jaw and handling the curb as easily as he was handling the snaffle. So if we take one hand forward and one hand backward and ask him to mobilize the jaw, Flash is well acquainted with the curb, and so you can see that he picks it up, drops it, very relaxed way. That's something that's very important. Then we can show them what we want them to understand through the curb in specific. I can take him, I have only the snaffle on this side, the curb and the snaffle on this side, and then I can ask him a little bit on the curb on one side if he can flex the pole. I'll do it while he's straight. And that's a very quiet and easy way to say, this is what I want with the curb. There are more exercises that we do, but we want them to understand what the curb is about before we get on and ask him to perform in the curb. Something that we need to understand about the double bridle is the contrasting and complementary effect of the snaffle versus the curb. The curb is for rounding the pole and extending the neck. The snaffle is for raising the neck and lateral flexions. So with having all of those effects together, we can do a lot with the horse with very subtle aids. I'll demonstrate here. So I can ask with the curb for him to give me the pole and then allow him to extend the neck. Good. Now I want him to come back up. I ask with the snaffle with a demi-erect. So now I can ask him for a flexion with the snaffle, because if I were to ask him for a flexion with the curb, it would tilt in his mouth and it's not clear. That's why I prefer the double bridle even over a curb. So I ask him for a flexion, then I can ask him for a pole flexion. Open the pole with the snaffle and flex the pole with the curb. Good. And then extend the neck. We don't want the horse to ever be afraid of the curb or hide behind the curb. We want him to be willing to connect with the curb and reach into the curb. One of the ways we do that and help the horse to understand that is actually action-reaction on the curb. So I'll pick up the curb, ask him to flex the pole, and then action-reaction. That way we know that the horse is not going to go too deep in behind the curb, and he's not going to hide from it because it's too strong for him. Those are the basic effects of the curb and the basic effects of the snaffle and how they work together. Now I'll hop on and show you a couple of things under saddle.